part of what I've struggled with around this is I didn't get into this to basically judge those things. I got into this to design technology that helps people connect, right? It's like...
Funny story. You got into this because while you were wasted one night, you wanted to turn your entire college into a hot or not database. That's why you got into this, Mark. Let's be totally clear.
Then you have the question of, are those organizations biased or not? And that's a very difficult question, but at least we're not the ones who are basically sitting here deciding. We're not the Ministry of Truth for the world that's deciding whether everything is true or not. So
no. Our small council of 9 are. It's not just me, okay? I'm not the Ministry of Truth, all right? Meta is not the Ministry of Truth. It's the Council of 9. All hail the council, may they benevolently give us rulings. Like that's the ones you have to worry about. Yeah. Now we got to give it the Zuck. Don't worry, this is short. It's only 14 minutes. But Mark Zuckerberg being on Joe Rogan is pretty big news. I mean, he's Mark Zuckerberg.
The Joe Rogan experience.
When we take down something that we're not supposed to, I mean that is like, I mean that's the worst. I mean,
how
that's
do you
like
discern? Like how? Like say.
What is it with all the tech billionaires having to talk like that? By the way, like they all start to add this to their voices. It's like my voice is more commanding now. I sound more authentic, like a titan.
Like these Christian Facebook pages, I don't know how they found out that 19 of 20 were fake, but if someone just says, I am Bob Smith, and they post as Bob Smith, and they have a photograph, but really what they're doing is trying to talk shit about Joe Biden and get people to vote Republican in the midterms. Like how do you know whether someone's real or not? Like this is the big argument with Elon and Twitter. Because Elon asked Twitter, like, what percentage of you...
Hey, Elon, if you did not know this, Joe, he's a strange dude who is completely fine impregnating his subordinates or trying to trade horses for hand jobs. That's who Elon Musk is. You don't have to take anything he does seriously just because he's the world's richest man. That doesn't make him the world's greatest man or even the world's smartest man. In fact, I'd say he's quite clown shoes. He's more concerned with impregnation than he is with the value of his companies, which do get really appreciated. Don't get me wrong. Tesla will go from, whatever it was. I think it was at almost $1,200 a share, bounced down to $600 because again he's like Twitter memes. That's my life, but he's not a serious human.
Your website is filled with bots, and they say 5%, and he says I don't believe you. I think it's higher, and let's find out how you've come to this conclusion.
Yeah,
and I believe they said that they just took 100 random Twitter pages and looked at the interaction, and there's some sort of an algorithm they applied to it. But how do you discern?
Okay, well, first off, we don't know what they provided to him because a lot of that information would be secret. So that's information being provided to the potential takeover of a company by another individual. That's why he would have been privy to that kind of information. It's not something where it's like, well, I heard it was just 100 random pages and they calculated the amount of bots based on that.
Yeah, so I mean, I think estimating the overall prevalence is one thing, but I think that the question of looking at a page and is this page authentic, I think that there's a bunch of signals around that. One of the things that we try to do is for large pages, we try to make sure that we know who the admin of that page is. We don't necessarily, you should be able to.
Because I don't, have the whole video up here. I wonder if the very start of this was Zuckerberg coming out trying to human for a little while. It's like, Joy, just want you to know, I love smoking meats. I really love smoking meats. Smoking meats is something I love to do. So maybe we could talk about the smoked meats and my smoker, because that's probably the most human thing about me.
Run an anonymous page. You don't necessarily need to out yourself and say who you are running it, but we want to make sure that we sort of have like an identity for that person on file, so that way we know, like at least behind the scenes, that that person is real. For certain political things, I think having a sense of what country they're originating from. I mean, some of that you can do just by looking at where their server traffic comes from, like is the IP address coming from Romania or because if it's like an ad in some other country's election, then you probably want to make sure that that ad is especially in countries that have laws around that, are coming from someone who's a valid citizen or like at least in that place. So there's a bunch of, I think I don't know, one theme in my worldview around this stuff, when it gets to some of the stuff that we talked about before, is like, I don't think that this stuff is black and white, or that you're ever going to have like a
Oh my God, so
perfect
deep.
AI system. I think it's all trade-offs all the way down, right? And you could build a system, and you can either be overly aggressive and capture a higher percent of the bad guys, but then also by accident take out some number of good guys, or you could be a little more lenient and say, okay, no, the cost of taking out any number of good guys is too high, so we're going to tolerate having, just a little bit more, like more bad guys on the.
This is a really fancy way of saying, hey, it's kind of fucked up that a whistleblower came out and then revealed a whole bunch of information about how the AI works, and that showed pretty conclusively that the AI, in fact, is meant to show more incendiary content. And we know the effects of that can sometimes be devastating on society, the world at large. But still, knowing that, we're not going to really stop what we do, because it does generate the most amount of the clicks and the engagement, and therefore the monies.
These are values questions, right? Around what do you value more, and those are super tricky.
And the thing is, under capitalism, if they didn't do that, their competitors will, and then destroy them, and then take over the company. And they're well aware, like, if someone else is like, well, we have a way to maintain way more engagement, like keep people online for incredible amounts of time, way more addictive than before. It's like, well, we have to emulate this. We have to make ours more addictive than that one. What can we do? What keeps people using these things? What keeps people mad? Certainly not like, kind of milquetoast posts where someone's like, had an okay day today, everybody. How you doing? Or other ones that it's like, hey, really enjoy iced tea on the weekends. Those aren't going to do it. It's going to be like, could you believe what the fuck this motherfucker did? Holy fucking shit, fuck him. And all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, yeah, you're right, fuck him. Oh, I have to do some research on this, get some pictures and some videos and post all that now.
Key questions. And part of what I've struggled with around this is I didn't get into this to basically judge those things. I got into this to design technology that helps people connect, right? It's like,
funny story. You got into this because while you were wasted one night, you wanted to turn your entire fucking college into a hot or not database. That's why you got into this, Mark. Let's be totally clear. You were drunk one night and you're like, you know what? It's time to turn all the ladies into a hot or not. Yo, wait, I will not be a sexist about this, okay? We're gonna add some dudes too. So here we go. That's it. There's the origin story of Facebook.
And like, I mean, you could probably tell when we spent the first hour talking about the metaverse and the future of basically building this whole technology roadmap to basically give people this realistic sense of presence. It's like,
you made a less fucking good VR chat. That's all y'all made. You did VR chat, but shittier. It cost $10 billion. It looks worse. It actually somehow looks worse than VR chat, which is free and has been out for a really long time. You somehow are doing that worse. Someone is making a lot of money somewhere. I don't know where and how. That's for you to tell.
That's what I'm here to do, right?
The most amazing thing about the metaverse is that, like, he still speaks about it like it's the future of humanity. Like, we are just trying to change the very paradigm of existence, and we think that we can do this. Maybe not even a bi-mode or like mode. We will find some new mechanism for making this happen. And you're like, fucking just shitty VR chat, bro. Like, come on, dog. We all see it. Everyone sees the screenshots. They're shared all over social media. You're releasing video promoting this shit every single time. You're like, what? Who signed off on this?
So this whole thing that's like arbitrating what is okay and what is not, I obviously have to be involved in that because this is at some level, I run the company and I can't just abdicate that. But I also don't think that as a matter of governance, you want all of that decision making vested in one individual. So I think one of the things that our country and our government gets right is the separation of powers. So, one of the things that I tried to create is we created this oversight board. It's an independent board that basically.
I will give a little teeny little bit of credit where credit is due. That is better than, say, the other social media policies, which has much more centralized power and decision making. That is a little bit better to have a board of a diverse board of individuals who can put their input into something, so it's not simply concentrating power in the hands of the very few. But it doesn't change the fact that he does have the ability to, if he wanted to, change that too. I mean, at the end of the day, he is a majority shareholder. He owns his company. He's not like Jack Dorsey, who has a much smaller stake in his own company. So there's that.
We appointed people whose kind of paramount value is free expression, but they also balance that with things like when is there going to be real harm to others in terms of safety or privacy or other human rights issues. And basically, that board, people in our community can appeal cases to when they think that we got it wrong, and that board actually gets to make the final binding decision, not us. So in a way, I actually think that that is a more legitimate form of governance than having just a team internally that makes these decisions, or maybe some of them go up to me, although I don't spend a ton of my time on this on a day-to-day basis. But like, I think it's generally good to have some kind of separation of power.
Oh, this is such a fucking little press circuit, because ultimately, like, there's still an enormous amount of power being concentrated into the hands of the very few when it comes to the oversight of what is taking place. Also, it's already been, revealed that you guys are intentionally promoting more incendiary content because it just drives engagement. So it makes sense. It totally makes sense why you would do that. But then there's all the real world problems that come out of Facebook, like actual, massive political events. And you should be able to recognize that, you are in large part a very crucial element of that. Like, you are central in some ways of what is developing or growing or happening.
Hours where you're architecting the governance, so that way
that's also true.
You,
in other markets,
have different stakeholders and different people who can make these decisions, and it's not just like one private company that's making decisions even about what just happens on our platform.
How do you guys handle things when they're a big news item that's controversial? Like, there was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because
at normal, it's so slow.
Because of the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Oh, so much
we had that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. Basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, you should be on high alert. We thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant. So our protocol is different from Twitter's. What Twitter did is they said you can't share this at all. We didn't do that. What we do is we have if something is reported to us as potentially misinformation, important misinformation, we also have this third-party fact-checking program because we don't want to be deciding what's true and false. And for I think it was 5 or 7 days when it was basically being determined whether it was false, the distribution on Facebook was decreased, but people were still allowed to share it. So you could still share it, you could still consume it.
So when you say the distribution is decreased,
it got shared.
How does that work?
It basically, the ranking in newsfeed was a little bit less. So fewer people saw it than would have otherwise. So it definitely.
By what percentage?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it's meaningful. But basically
it's meaningful.
A lot of people were still able to share
I would
it.
describe it as meaningful.
We got a lot of complaints that was the case. Obviously this is
very meaningful,
hyper-political issue. So depending on what side of the political spectrum, you either think we didn't censor it enough or censored it way too much. But we weren't sort of as black and white about it as Twitter. We just kind of thought, hey, look, if the FBI, which I still view as a legitimate institution in this country, it's like very professional law enforcement, if they come to us and tell us that we need to be on guard about something, then I want to take that seriously.
Did they specifically say you need to be on guard about that story?
No, I don't remember if it was that specifically, but it basically fit the pattern.
When something like that turns out to be...
So, does this story have any basis in reality? Did that happen? Well, you get it.
Be real. Is there regret for not having it evenly distributed and for throttling the distribution of that story?
What do you mean evenly distributed?
I mean evenly in that it's not suppressed. It's not.
Yeah. I mean, it sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it turned out after the fact, the fact checkers looked into it. No one was able to say it was false, right? So basically, it had this period where it was getting list distribution. So yeah, but I think I think it sucks though. I think in the same way that probably having to go through a criminal trial but being proven innocent in the end sucks. It still sucks to have that you had to go through a criminal trial, but at the end you're free. So it's I don't know if the answer would have been don't do anything or don't have any process. I think the process was pretty reasonable. We still let people share it, but obviously you don't want situations like that.
But certainly much more reasonable than Twitter's stance, and it's probably also the case of armchair quarterbacking, right? Or at least Monday morning quarterbacking, I should say, because in the moment you had reason to believe, based on the FBI talking to you, that it wasn't real and that there was going to be some propaganda. So what do you do?
Yeah.
And then if you just let it get out there, and what if it changes the election and it turns out to be bullshit? That's a real problem. And I would imagine that those kind of decisions are the most difficult. The decisions of like what is allowed and what is not allowed.
Yeah. I mean, what would you do in that situation?
I don't know what I would do. I would have to like really thoroughly. Well, first of all, you're dealing with the New York Post, which is one of the oldest newspapers in the country. So I would say I would want to talk to someone from the New York Post, and I would say, how did you come up with this data? Like where are you getting the information from? How do you know whether or not this is correct? And then you have to make a decision because they might have got duped. It's hard because everybody wants to look at it after the fact. Now that we know that the laptop was real and that it was a legitimate story and there is potential corruption involved with him, what we think, oh, that should not have been restricted. That should not have been banned from sharing on Twitter. Right. I think everybody agrees with that. Even Twitter agrees with that. But the thing is, then they didn't think that. In the beginning, they thought it was fake. So what do? Like if something comes along and
with the whole Hunter Biden laptop thing, and no one is more obsessed with his cock than the right. Holy shit. But anyways, with that whole fiasco, yeah, if there is evidence of criminal wrongdoing, especially involving investments and insider knowledge, at the highest levels for him to be able to make that, absolutely go after him. Fine. The idea that this is part of some mass censorship campaign, like, that's based off one example of it, I think, and that's like the one involving the New York Times that retracted a story, which, don't get me wrong, sure, that's newsworthy. You should also mention that because that's pretty interesting that they would do that in order to maybe potentially help the presidential campaign of a president of the United States. Also interesting, sure, but that's those stories. That's different than broadly saying this is happening everywhere, that there was just no one was printing anything about Hunter Biden's laptop. No information was coming about Hunter Biden's laptop. Absolutely nothing was able to be said negatively about this person because it could impact the election. It's like, it was everywhere. It was fucking everywhere. And like, if you want to say, well, that was just on right-wing magazines, right-wing publications, I was like, there may have been way less noise or front page, like, coverage of it by ABC, MSNBC, all these liberal media outlets, because of course they're liberal media outlets. They do have a side, as Fox News and Breitbart do have a side. This is right versus left, very basic shit. But it's not as if it was just also completely buried and then just didn't exist. And then everyone's like, well, we'll never truly know what happened to Hunter Biden and his laptop and what it could mean, And again, it's like, if someone was doing, and like if the Democrats were doing endless investigations into like Donald Trump Jr. or Eric Trump, but that's it all the time. It's like, turns out Donald Trump Jr. Was found with a unusual white powdered substance in one of his like lockers. Does that mean that Trump should never run again? If Donald Trump Jr. has been found with the white substance in one of his lockers, does that not destroy the credibility of Donald Trump? It's like, no, Donald Trump destroys the credibility of Donald Trump on his own. You don't need his son to do that and take him down with you.
And the Republicans cook up some scheme to make it look like Joe Biden's a terrible person, and they only do it so that they can win the election, but it's really just propaganda. What are you supposed to do with that? You're supposed to not allow that to be distributed. So if they
I know. The Trump nuclear stuff, that should be, in your minds, bigger news than fucking what is on Hunter Biden's laptop. Like, if he did a shitty business deal and it's worthy of going to jail, fine, send him to jail. If he's just a fucked up businessman who uses insider information to do overseas projects, then yes, absolutely. If that's a crime, lock him up. That's all you have to do about that one. But like, you can't just then in the other like side be like, well, and Trump did declassify those documents before he went and refused to give them back, and he was asked couple months before they went over there to get them back. And well, I mean, he can't declassify them, but he had a right to keep them at the end of the day. There's that, right? Well, it's actually safer in his hands. Trump is definitely in a position right now. Well, okay, this weird Saudi Arabia connection that seems to be getting quite a bit of traction about how he had the potential to perhaps sell some of that information to them. We don't have any conclusive evidence yet of that. I mean, and if that did happen, they are our allies, they're friends. At the end of the day, we have a very strong partnership, oil for weapons kind of deal. So, I mean, is it really that bad if they knew a little bit about our nuclear capabilities and new information related to that?
I think that's the case. It makes sense to me that they would try to stop it, but I just don't think that they looked at it hard enough. When the New York Post is talking about it, they're pretty smart about what they release and what they don't release. If they're going over some data from a laptop and you could talk to a person, but again, like, this is just one story, like one individual story. Like, how many of these pop up every day, especially in regards to polarizing issues like climate change or COVID or foreign policy or Ukraine? anytime there's like a really controversial issue where some people think that it's imperative that you take a very specific stance and you can't have the other stance, like those moments on social media, those trouble a lot of people because they don't know why certain things get censored or certain things.
But I'll be totally honest with you. If you look at the vast censorship that takes place on social media, it continuously seems to be described by like conservatives as this is going to be obviously with a right-wing bias. There's a right-wing censorship bias, and they don't want you to know certain ideas and certain lines and blah, blah, blah. And it doesn't bear out in actual data when you look at it. Like right-wingers are not overwhelmingly being specifically silenced. The issues and areas in which they are way more than the left or liberals getting their accounts stalled and or deleted is typically through transphobia. It is them refusing to stop dead naming, them refusing to use proper pronouns, them refusing to stop saying things that are clearly, going to cause distress to people who happen to be trans. The right is overwhelmingly unable to do that. And they think it's almost a game, seeing how much they can push the limits of things, get their accounts locked down. Oh, my account's been locked down. Oh no, they're silencing me. Oh, the truth is coming out. It's like, it's not silencing you because you're giving some really insightful, fucking jaw-dropping fact that no one else is going to say. It's like, holy shit, I can't believe he's telling the truth about this. He's like a fucking almost a whistleblower. What a fucking journalist. It's like you're just an asshole online, and you like being an asshole online, and you want to be an asshole online as you are IRL, and then you're kind of getting stopped for that, and because they're not tolerating that kind of behavior. That's not the right being like 1984 cancel cultured in the same way you think it is in relation to speech, like free speech.
Promoted.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's like to be in your spot.
I'm glad the Zuck
one of
agrees
the things I really wanted to talk to you about is this, because like to be in your spot must be insanely difficult to have, no matter what.
Well, also it can't be natural. Could you imagine like walking around in your life where your decisions can directly impact a billion people? Like a billion people who are connected to your network, and you can do things that will impact their lives or change like dynamics of their lives, even specific to regions. You can do that regionally, and like that's not normal. That's normal, like to walk around the world with that. It's why so many of these people are weirdos. Like whenever you see tech giants, you're like, why do you talk like this? Why do you talk about how you're going to change the paradigm of the universe?
Decision you make, you're going to have a giant chunk of people that are upset at you. And there might be a right way to handle it, but I don't know what the fuck right way is.
Well, I think the right way is to establish principles for governance that try to be balanced and not have the decision-making too centralized. Because I think that it's hard for people to accept that, like, some team at Meta or that I personally am making all these decisions. And I think people should be skeptical about so much.
Like 5. It's like 5 companies control basically the majority of the internet we go see. It's 5. It's about as centralized as it gets. I don't think anyone who understands all this would think of it as a decentralized system or network.
Concentration around that. So that's why a lot of the innovation that I've tried to push for in governance is around things like establishing this oversight board. So that way you have people who are luminaries around expression from all over the world, but also in the U.S. Folks like Michael McConnell, who's a Stanford professor, who's like he was I forget which Republican president appointed him, but I mean he was I think going to be considered for the Supreme Court at some point. I mean he's a very
monopoly. That's a good way to put it.
Very prominent and kind of celebrated free expression advocate, and he helped me set the thing up. And I think like setting up forms of governance around that are independent of us, that basically get the final say on a bunch of these decisions. And that's a step in the right direction. I mean, in the Hunter Biden case that you talked about before, I don't want our company to decide what's misinformation and what's not. So
was this Jackson Hinkle is spamming Owen? Is he still fucking going off about this Rolling Stone article? Oh man, that Rolling Stone article, as well as all of these individuals, by the way, it's all so much worse now that the whole Caleb Maupin stuff has dropped because they were so intertwined with all of that. So like every single member there, and they haven't said anything. I haven't seen a single comment from Infrared. I don't know if he's talked about it on a show because I don't watch his show anymore. Same thing with Jackson. Like, have they released a statement on Caleb? I can see Jackson because he's like, his Twitter account right now is full-time defense of Andrew Tate. Like, bet you didn't know that Andrew Tate wasn't actually caught beating this woman, that the woman actually was consensually there with him. Oh, bet you didn't know that Andrew Tate has like conservative values. But anyways, Owen Higgins is writing a Rolling Stone article on Jackson Hinkle, and called Jackson Hinkle, and he refused to do an interview. So he was afraid of a phone call, but he said he would debate him in the marketplace of ideas. Not dropping anymore. Owen, I thought you wanted to talk to me. Now no response. Owen, I miss you. Please write soon. I enjoyed all our lively conversations. Owen, Roddy's need official comment from you for a story he is writing. His question is, do you still plan to drop the smear article about Mr. Hinkle? Owen, are you there? Owen. Actually, you know what it would sound more? It would sound more like Snake. Owen.
Work with third parties and basically let different organizations do that. Now, I mean, then you have the question of, are those organizations biased or not? And that's a very difficult question. But at least we're not the ones who are basically sitting here deciding. We're not the Ministry of Truth for the world that's deciding whether everything is true or not. So I'd say.
No. Our small council of 9 are. It's not just me, okay? I'm not the Ministry of Truth, all right? Meta is not the Ministry of Truth. It's the Council of 9. All hail the council, may they benevolently give us rulings. Like that's the ones you have to worry about. Yeah.
This is not a solved problem. Controversies aren't going away. I think that it is interesting that the US
Someone in main chat asked Lance if that's the parody account. I thought Maupin deleted. That was Jackson Hinkle's account that I had on screen. Caleb Maupin's Twitter is still gone. He has also locked comments on his YouTube channel, but the YouTube channel is still up and running. CPI has disbanded. They are no more. They've basically fractured off and gone towards either Hinkle or Infrared. It's not as if people who were like already deeply intertwined in that kind of like Pat Sock philosophy were really going to start migrating and taking chances with the left. They were just basically looking for another kind of like, strongman daddy, which would be a weird switch, to go from Caleb Maupin, who's like, are you ready? To someone like Infrared, who's like, oh, welcome, catch my muscles. It would be a bit of a switch, but there would be some adjusting pains. You'd have a new daddy eventually, and everything works out.
Is actually more polarized than most other countries. So I think sitting in the US, it's easy to extrapolate and say, hey, it probably feels this way around the whole world. And from the social science research that I've seen, that's not actually the case. There's a bunch of countries where social media is just as prominent, but polarization is either flat or has declined slightly. So there's something kind of different happening in the US.
Hey, so if he's trying to downplay the polarization, that it's not the only reason. Social media is not exclusive to this, of course, but it plays a large role in accelerating it. No question. People spend hours and hours of their days on their phones or computers now on their screens. That's where we spend the majority of our day, I would contend, is staring at screens in one way or another. And if you have, which has been shown by your whistleblower, AI that is directly trying to keep people engaged as long as possible, incendiary as possible content needs to be promoted, well then, sir, what are we doing here? You cannot try to use this. Like, there's other countries that also have social media, grant you not the same access or speeds that you might have here, but they certainly have a proliferation of social media, and they're not polarized like we are. I mean, this could not have anything to do with me. It just might be America. I think America is she's certain bad, Joe. We've got to help her out. All right, we got to take one for the team here. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form, available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
To our gods, Xander Corvus and Peyton L. Juste, we shall spend many a generations building mighty cathedrals in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we are but your oafish jesters, here to offer you a laugh at any opportunity. To our brave knights of the Round Table, Rachel K., Izzy Solidarity, Victoria Bell, Sebastian Demel, Mark Harmon, Benji Arney, Scary Earth Human, Tony, DM Rivera, Resident Scarecrow, Sir Nickus, Cheryl Alvarez, Ruby Kelly, Brandon, Words Greenwood, Everything Important, Hegbert Celine, Matthew Scarborough, Stellar Vision, Ariane McCarthy, Doug Cady, Daniel Sutton, Jenna Tao, Dark Puppy, Quiet One 85, Anna Loves Riley, Omni, Riley and Anna, Poodlehawk, Multimondi, Trevbot EXE, Brian Ephraim, Anthropophojack, Catherine, Ramon Acosta, Incosin, Ralph Parler, Violent Orchard, Political Puppy, La Media Panza, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. We salute our valiant heroes off to fight injustice everywhere.